Evening, friends, fellow guitar players. Tyler Grant here at jamplay.com. Thanks for joining us this evening here for week 3 in our live lesson series on playing over chord changes in open position. I hope you've enjoyed the series so far. If you're fresh joining us this week, welcome. We're going to take things really slow so that we can play along and take it at a pace that everybody could follow. Remember, you can always access these lessons on the archives if you missed something and need to go back, all you Jamplay members. Okay, so here we are in the key of G major. Let's just go ahead and strum that chord, any version of it you like, just to get the sound in your head, okay? So this progression we're going to be working on today is a 1, that's your G major chord, to a 5, which is a D major. Go ahead and strum that. To a 6 minor, which is the E minor chord. And then the 4, which is the C major. So that's our progression. Let's go ahead and strum through this. It's going to be 4 beats per chord. Any kind of strum pattern you like. It'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4. I might do kind of a boom strum like this. Or kind of swinging down and up strums, country style, okay? So let's try this. A ready and a G major. 1, 2, 3. A 4, D major. 1, 2, 3, 4. E minor. 1, 2, 3, 4. C. If you don't have any strum patterns down, just do down strums. Back to G, 1, 2, 3, 4, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, E minor, C, any kind of strum pattern is fine. The idea here is that we're getting you used to figures that you can play over these chords, and so we're really focused on the tonality, on the sound of the notes, not so much the rhythm. So there is that chord progression, and you'll have all of the practice tracks at different tempos of that to play along with. So now let's explore the G major scale for a moment. So this is a scale pattern. You know, we were doing C major and A minor the last couple weeks, which are patterns where you have 1 octave of the scale and then partial octaves below it and above it. This G major scale, you have 2 complete octaves of the scale. So instead of writing out each octave individually, as I do in the other lessons, I wrote the entire position so we could see it. There's only 2 notes lower than the tonic. From there, you have 2 complete octaves of the scale, from that G note to the highest note, G. Okay? So, as we do when we're practicing scales, we sing the tonic note. 1 or 1. Same note in different octaves, wherever you're comfortable singing it. This is really low. So I will probably start here. 1, okay? And it doesn't matter what octave you're singing. You want to sing the scale like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So when I'm doing that, I'm singing the scale degrees, and I'm memorizing the sounds of those scale degrees. Also, memorizing the feeling of where those fingers go to make those sounds. So eventually, I can hear a melody, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da, and know exactly where those notes are, because I've spent that time memorizing the sounds that I can take away from the instrument and practice in my head. And when I'm singing all the time, I can practice 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 1, etc. And that becomes automatic eventually. So that's the point of these lessons. It's the point of most of what I do as far as improvising, finding melodies, playing by ear. It starts with understanding the major scale. So those are the scale degrees. You're looking at the tablature, and that tells you the fret numbers. I would encourage you to not look at the tablature at all if you know this scale already, or if you can find it by ear. The most important part is that we leave our fingers in open position. So the second fret is always played by the second finger. The third fret is always played by the third finger, and so on. You have one note in this scale, the seventh note, the F sharp, that you have to play with your fourth finger, okay? And that's the only one in this scale position. So, to take into account the lower notes, this is your tonic note. Know that that's the root. It has a parentheses around it on the tablature. But that's your root note, that's your tonic. So to get the entire road map of what we're doing, let's take this note here, play it, it's a G, and then go down a fret to the second fret, F sharp, that's the 7, and then down one more note to the open E, that's the 6, okay? So that's the lowest note of this scale that we can play. So let's go ahead and start on that note and play it and sing 6. That's the sixth note of the scale. Now play the F sharp, that's the 7, and then the G is the 1. Now from there, we will start on the 1 and we will ascend the scale. 1, open A is 2, the B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6, F sharp is 7, and G is 1. So there's a complete octave of the scale. Let's practice descending that one time, okay? Because descending you have to know as well as the ascending part. So we'll start on that open G and play the same thing in reverse order. So down to F sharp is the 7, E is the 6, if I played it clean, D is the 5, C is the 4, B is the 3, A is the 2, G is the 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and play that ascent one more time and we'll continue. So starting on 1, open A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, open D, 5, E, 6, F sharp, 7, and G is 1. Okay, so remember you stop whenever you arrive on the tonic note and start on that same note again before you move on. So let's start on this open G and we will ascend the higher octave. So here's G, 1, second fret, second fret A note is the 2, open B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6, F sharp is 7, G is 1. I switched octaves there. You notice how I can do that. It doesn't matter what octave you're singing as long as you're matching the proper scale degree. So I'm singing this an octave lower, but it sounds the same. 1, you can tell it's the same pitch. So we'll descend from here. 1, descending to 7, open E is the 6, D is 5, C is 4, skipping up again, 4, open B is 3, A is 2, and G is 1. Okay, then we'll descend from there. 1, down to the 7, down to the 6, 5, 4, let's cover the low notes one more time. 1, 1, down to 7, down to 6, back to 7, back to 1. There you go. Now you've covered the whole thing. Remember to breathe, or you might start missing notes. Okay, so now let's put that into context with a couple of these examples. So the first example are 3-note figures that outline the 1 chord. So a 3-note figure that outlines the G major chord would have chord tones on the strong beats. So it sounds like this. And the scale degrees we're playing are 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Okay? And then it continues. Each successive example is just targeting the next 2 scale degrees, or the next two chord tones in the scale. So the second example goes from the 3 to the 4 to the 5, accenting the 3 and the 5 of the scale. So it all sounds like a G chord. Okay, so let's go through these one by one. I'll count you in on each one, and we'll just focus on them one at a time. Starting with the first measure, 3-note figures that outline the 1 chord. Here we go. Ready and slow and repeat and great. Next example goes from the 3rd of the chord up to the 5th of the chord, all scale-wise, right back down. Okay, try that. The second measure. Ready and go and repeat and great. Then the last 2 start, well, the third one starts on the 5 of the chord, goes up to the 6, and then skips to the tonic. 5, 6, 1, which is a very common figure, okay? And then right back down. So let's try that. Ready and go and repeat and okay. The last example is kind of an alternate version of this, and I do these on all of the chord examples so far in this series. So I'm starting on the 6 now and walking up the scale scale-wise to the 7 to the 1. And then on the descent, I go back, skipping the 7, 1, 6, 5. So that's just an alternate version of it. If you happen to be on this note, you'll know how to make your way up to the tonic. And then descending, you want to land on a chord tone. So I wouldn't descend the same notes. I would skip one to get down to the 5, because those are the only 2 notes that I'm really trying to accent, trying to outline the 1 chord. Okay? So let's play that 4th example there on the 1 chord. Measure 4. Ready and a slow and repeat and. So you hear the 1 chord over all of those figures. So moving on, our next chord is a D, but we're going to examine this as it is in chord theory, the 5-7, the dominant 7th chord. The dominant 7th chord always has an extra note in it than the other triads. The triads all go 1, 3, 5, but the dominant 7th has a flat 7 as well. So there's 4 different chord tones you can target. So, but we're always going to start on the 1 in these examples. 1, 2, 3 of a D major chord, 3, 2, 1 of a D major chord. So let's try that first figure and repeat it. Ready and go and and. Repeat, and. Okay, next measure, we're doing the same thing as we did in the previous chord, going from the third of the chord up to the fifth and back down. So let's try that measure and repeat it. Ready and go, and. Repeat, and. Great. The next measure will go from the fifth up to the flatted seventh of that chord. Then back down, flatted 7, 6, 5 of a D7 chord. You'll see those notes in the chord shape. Okay, here we go. Try that one. Ready and a slow and. Repeat. And. Great. The fourth measure of these D7 examples goes from the fifth straight up to the flatted 7 to the tonic and down the same way. Tonic, flatted 7, fifth. Kind of has like a bluesy minor pentatonic kind of feeling to it. Okay, let's try that one. Ready and a slow and. Repeat. And. Okay? If I string these all together, you're going to hear the D7 chord happening, and you're not going to hear a chord change if you just listen. And they continue up the next octave as well. Remember, when you learn these figures, transpose them. If you go up the neck, you can hit all of them. You're going to hear some familiar melodies in there too. Anyway, each one of these, internalize it, explore it, play it in as high an octave and as low an octave as you can, okay? At least in open position for now, okay? We're not going up the neck in this series. Okay, moving on to the E minor chord, the 6 minor in the key of G. So the first figure goes from the 1 to the 2 of the chord to the flatted 3rd of the chord. So remember, when I say that, I'm just being very specific about what makes a triad minor or major. And the minor triad has a flatted 3rd compared to its parallel major. Okay, so that's why I say 1, 2, flat 3, 2, 1. But I don't care how you think of it, whatever works for you. I'm just kind of telling you what I do. Okay, so here's the first figure on an E minor chord, the 6 minor chord. Ready and a slow and. Repeat. Okay, remember, you can go an octave lower with that same figure. And you can go an octave higher, all in open position. So that's an important one there. You have 3 entirely different places to play that same figure in different octaves. So the next figure would go from the flatted 3rd of the E minor chord up to the 5th. 5, 4, flat 3. Flat 3, 4, 5, flat 5, 4, flat 3. Okay, so let's try that figure. Ready and go and. and repeat. Now, obviously, that same figure works over a G major chord. Same figure works over the 6 minor. So we're going to be exploring these things as we've done so far in the series as well. A figure that'll work over 2 different chords. Let the chord change do the work. Keep your melodies simple. Okay? So the third figure on an E minor chord goes from the 5th of the chord, the B, open B string, to the flatted 7, which is a D, up to the tonic of the chord, E. So 5, flat 7, 1, 1, flat 7, 5. Where else can you do that? An octave lower. Okay, let's try that example. Here we go. Ready and a go and repeat and okay. And then here's just the alternate version of that, starting on the 6th of the chord to the flatted 7 to the 1, and then down 1, flat 7, 5. So starting on the 6, ascending, and then descending, skipping the 6 altogether to land on a chord tone. Okay, let's try that figure. Ready and a slow and repeat and great. So there's our 6 minor chord, all 4 figures that we're going to be using in the examples. We'll move on to the 4 chord. Any questions coming in yet, Chris?
No questions yet, but just remind everybody, if you do have any questions at all, type them in the chat, and we'll get Tyler to answer them here in just a little bit.
So moving on to the 4 chord. 4 is the C major. And the first example starts on the tonic note of that chord, the root note of that chord, which is a C, the 4th note of our G scale. But remember, as I'm on each individual chord, I'm thinking of the chord tones of that particular chord. So for C, I'm thinking 1, 2, 3 of my C chord, 3, 2, 1. Okay? Let's try that first example there, the first measure. Ready and a slow and repeat and okay. Then the next measure goes from the 3rd of the C chord up the scale, up the G major scale, so that F sharp is part of it, up to the 5th of the C chord, then right back down, same sequence. So that's where it differs from a C major scale. In C major, it would use this note. But since this is the 4 chord of the key of G, we keep that F sharp in there because that's what the note is in the key of G. Okay? So it'll sound like a 4 chord. All right? Here we go. Starting on the 3rd of the C chord. Ready and a go and repeat and great. Moving on, the 5th of the C chord is the open G string, and then we got our 6th of the chord, the A note, up to the C tonic. That's that little major pentatonic lick that we like so much. 5, 6, 1 of the chord. Okay? And right back down the same way. Let's try that. Ready and a slow go, and repeat, and. Okay. Then our alternate version starts in the 6 of the chord, goes to the 7, to the tonic, and then down, tonic, 6, 5. 6, 7, 1, 1, 6, 5. Here we go, real slow. Ready, and go, and. Repeat. And. There we go. So now we're going to put these all into some context and look at these composed examples. First one is example number 1, playing through a bunch of these figures kind of in sequence, okay? So let's just walk our way through this example 1 real quick in the key of G major. Starting now, again, this is a similar rhythm, pretty much the same rhythm as we've done in the previous examples. And again, I don't want you to have to think about rhythm too much. I want you to just think about the sounds of the notes and targeting the proper notes for these exercises. So I kept the rhythm pretty consistent. So this first measure goes. Okay, so the way I count that is 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Each measure is pretty much the same rhythm. All of them are in fact exactly the same rhythm. So you can just think about that sequence of notes rather than having to think about the rhythm too much. So first measure is a G major chord. So I'm doing the first example from G major, and I'm stringing that together with the second example. Okay, those are the first 2 examples we did on G, strung together. Okay, so it's the 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5 of the chord. And then on a D major, I'm going to use the same note I ended on, because that is a D. It's the root note of the D chord, and I'm going to descend this way. So that's 2 of the examples we did on a D chord. The 1, 1 flat 7, 5, and then 5 descending to the 3 of the chord. Okay? So that measure again. You hear the sound of that D7, right? So now I'm just going to go down 1 note from there to the root of the E minor chord. And I'm going to play the first 2 examples from the E minor. 1, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's how that measure is built. Stringing together the first 2 examples from E minor. Now on the C, I'm going to start on the same note as I did. Because remember, I'm trying to find the simplest path from one chord change to the other. So if I can use the same notes, I will. This was the E minor one. All I do for the C is adapt the second figure to the C chord. The first figure is the same. That figure works over an E minor or a C major, right? So I adjust that second half of the figure to reflect one of the examples we did on a C chord. Okay, so again, that measure on the C chord goes. Okay, so that we're halfway through this example. Now, again, I'm kind of just going up a note or down a note to find my next figure. So in this case, I'm going to go up a note. That's the 5th of the G chord, descending to the 3rd, and then the 3rd descending down to the tonic. It's the exact opposite of what we did in the first measure of this, which was we're doing the same thing now, descending, same set of notes. Okay? And for the D, the next measure will start on this, the 5th of the D chord, descending to the 3rd, and then the 3rd, descending to the tonic. So those are the first two examples of the D chord strung together. Okay? Now the easiest path to an E minor chord is going to be just go up a note to the tonic of the E minor chord and descend the two figures that would descend from there, which is going down to the 5th from the tonic by way of the flatted 7th, and then descending from there down to the 3rd of the E minor chord. And then I'm going to imitate that figure on a C chord. That's the only note I'm changing, from the B to the C, to outline those two figures which exist on the C chord. Okay? All right, so this is really simple, right? But it changes with each chord. The set of notes remains the same. It's all from a G major scale. So keep that in mind. If your fingers want to just go up or down, keep to those notes of the G major scale and it'll all work. But we're being very specific about our note selections over each chord. And so again, it would be helpful for you to memorize each of those figures that we practiced, because this is exactly what we're doing, using those exact same figures and just stringing them together to make some music. So let's try this example number 1 in G with the rhythm track at the slowest tempo. We'll play it once through and then we'll repeat. A 1, a 2, a ready and go and. Repeat. Okay, hopefully that made a lot of sense to you musically. You can see the shapes on your fingers and you can hear how they fit the chords. Any questions yet? Okay, that means you're really focused and really attentive and getting it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next tempo, medium tempo. Same example, this will just be cranked up a little bit to 47 beats per minute. Now remember, we have these all recorded for you Jam Play members in the guided practice section of this live lesson. So you can go to the archives of the lesson, download the guided practice, and play along with all these examples at all 4 different tempo. So here we go. Let's give it a shot, playing through once and then repeating at 47 beats per minute. A 1, a 2, a 3 and 4 and. Repeat. So now to try something different that I haven't done yet in these live playing over changes series, I'm going to play back that same track and I'm going to sing a version of this. I'm just going to sing these same 3-note figures as if I'm improvising a guitar solo, but this will be what I would play if I was playing, okay? And you can do this at any time. Anytime you're listening to music, anytime you're hearing chord changes go by, you can practice this. So this is how you might do it if you were away from your instrument. And this also really helps to conceive of the ideas, to understand them better. It's just like memorizing poetry or memorizing verse. You know, you're memorizing these little ideas, and you will start to be able to flow through the changes in a very natural way once you get this kind of thing down. So I'm just going to sing along to the track. A 1, a 2, a 3, and 4, and. Da 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 da. Ba da 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 da. Da 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 and so on. You get the idea? It's supposed to be a seamless concept. What you're hearing, what you intend to play, becomes what you do play. I see Chris going for the mic as if we have a question.
We do have one question here from Ailes, I think. Is the dominant 7th added to the 5th to emphasize resolution to the tonic always?
The 5th can always, the 5 chord can always be a dominant 7th chord. You always have 4 notes to choose from. In this case, we are not resolving to the tonic. We're not even resolving the chord. It's a false resolution. We got a 1 chord to a 5 chord. Now, whether it's a D or a D7, it doesn't matter. We're going to the 6 minor. Okay? You would expect that chord to resolve to the 1. But in this case, we're not. We're going to the 6 minor. So those same notes are there from the tonic chord, so you can treat them the same way. It's going to sound like this instead of. Okay? So the dominant 7th, the 4th note of that D arpeggio. 1, 1, 3, 5, flat 7. That's just there as an extra chord note. And it doesn't matter where you're going, that note can always be used on the 5 chord. Good question. So why don't we do this? Let's crank this up one more notch, just for those of you who are feeling adventurous, and get through this example number 1 one last time here at 60 beats per minute. This will be a little faster than we just were. 1, 2, 2. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. So hearing it at the faster tempo kind of helps to keep it in context. There is one more faster tempo than this for you advanced players. Check it out in the guided practice and in the downloaded supplemental content here for this lesson once it's archived. For now, I'm going to show you one more little thing. Chris, if you want to show the tab one more time. I'm going to play this exact example, but I'm going to just embellish it a little bit in a couple of different ways. I might kind of spice up the accents, or palm mute, or use dynamics. Play some notes shorter than others, some notes longer than others. That's long notes. This is short. Okay, so I'll do that without changing any of the notes at all, just to give you an idea of how you can take the same figures, but change up the music, okay? And I'll do that at the same tempo. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, that's not changing a single note at all, just changing the way I'm playing them. Now, I'm going to kind of take it one step further, and I might add a little note in the beginning or in the end of the figure. For instance, the first one I could go. I'll add a little something or take something away, and on some of them I can go like on the E minor, I can go. That's the figure. I can go something like, just embellishing it with a note below it or a note above it, okay? So this will be the exact same examples again, just embellished a little bit. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Makes sense, right? We've gotten some questions in the past from all you bluesy guitar players about how do you add bluesy language to this. Let me do this again. I'll play the exact same examples, and I'll add a little bluesy twist, either in the front or on the back of each example, okay? But it's still going to sound like the chord changes. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, and 4. So a couple of them weren't exactly the same, but you get the idea. I was kind of bluesing up those same figures. So you have these options once you master this type of vocabulary. And again, this is the same type of vocabulary that most styles, most genres will use, whether you're into country music, flat picking, bluegrass, jazz, rock and roll, blues even, okay? So let's move on. We're running short of time here to example number 2. This is just kind of variations on example number 1, using the exact same figures, but we're just using different ones in different orders. So the first measure goes from the 3rd of the G major chord. And then, so that's the second example from G major, and the 4th example of G major strung together. That's the alternate example, right? Instead of I'm going. Okay? So that's the first measure. 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Second measure is on a D chord, starting on the open A, which is the 5th note of the D chord, up the scale to the flatted 7, and then tonic to the 3rd. So that's the 3rd example of D. D7, and the first example, strung together. Next measure is an E minor, starting on the 3rd, up to the 5th, then up to the tonic. And then on the C major chord, it's going to be the low E string, open, which is the 3rd of the C chord, up to the 5th of the C chord, up to the tonic of the C chord. So in other words, the second example of C and the 3rd example from C chord. So what am I doing with this grand scheme of things? You see that my first figure starts on this note. Next one starts on the next lower note. Next one goes down one more note. Then this one skips a note because this note isn't in the chord. So I'm just descending the scale with each figure as well as I can. I had to skip the F sharp because that just wasn't in the C chord. But the first 3 figures on the G chord, then down a note to the D chord, down a note to the E minor, skip a note to the next lowest note. So it makes that little descending figure with each of these sequences. Now, the key of G, we're back to the last system here, back to a G chord. It's the 3rd to the tonic, right back up to the 3rd. So that's just example 1 in reverse. Now, this is clever. I'm going to descend the scale again as I was before. So for the D chord, I'll go. That's the 5th of the D chord, down to the 3rd. Back to the 5th. So example number 2 from D in reverse. Now E minor. That's just example number 1 in reverse. Flat 3, down to the tonic, back to the flat 3. And then for the C, I'm going to ascend the 2 figures that would start from this note. So the C chord would be the 5th, 5, 6, 1 of the C, 1, 2, 3 of the C. Okay, so again, I know it's a lot coming at you at once if you're playing through this stuff fresh, but it's the exact same examples that we did in the warm-up section of this. So once you get this down, you're going to realize what a piece of cake it is to string these things together. For now, let's do our best at 35 beats per minute. A 1, a 1, a 2, a 3, and 4, and. Repeat. All right, nice work. So we're just about at the end. Are there any questions? If not, we'll just kind of go through this one more time at a faster tempo.
We have no questions.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go for this at 47 beats per minute just to close out the lesson. Remember, check this out on archive if you need to go back and catch anything that you missed. If you went through this like once or twice more in real time, you'd probably gain a lot of this. I would encourage you to sit and memorize the figures and then come back and just play through the guided practice, and you'll start mastering these and internalizing them. Okay? So here we go. Example number 2 in the key of G at 47 beats per minute. A 1, a 2, a 3, and 4, and. Repeat. Okay, thanks for joining me. Thanks for playing along. I'm Tyler Grant here at jamplay.com. Next week is week 4 of this 6-week series of playing over changes in open position. Tune in at the same time. I believe there's a time change this week. Is that correct? Okay, so we're going back to standard time, most states. So it'll be 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time next week, 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. I'm Tyler Grant. See you then.